Jai Sai Ram. Oh, come on, y'all can do better than that. Jai Sai Ram. All right. I'm always tickled to tell stories. We're going to have to adjust your timeline a little bit because it's a little later than that when I came here. But I'll tell you all about that. But first, let me tell you this. December 31st, 1971, living in Chicago. My wife and I go to a New Year's Eve party, have an argument. She takes a cab home. I come home later, do what husbands do in that situation, sleep on the couch. Okay. So I'm sleeping on the couch, and somewhere in the middle of the night, this voice says, "Wake up." And I'm fully conscious, but I can't move. Can't open my eyes, can't move anything. The voice speaks to me in my head, says, "Pretend like you're asleep, turn over slowly, and take a peek." Now, at this point in my life, I'm not into any spiritual, metaphysical, nothing. I'm somewhere between an agnostic and an atheist. But I got voices in my head telling me what to do that seem to be controlling my body. I figure I should pay attention. I am crazy, I'm not stupid. So I mentally say, okay. And I've got my body back, and I do what the voice says. I pretend like I'm asleep. I turn over slowly and take a peek. Here's my wife coming across the room with a rifle, putting a round into the chamber, and coming to send me on to a much closer relationship with God than I had tended at that point in my life. She got close enough I was able to take it away. People say, well, that's when you left. No, I'm not stupid, but I can do stupid. A week later, again, the voice in my head says, "Wake up, something's wrong." And I find her in the kitchen in the middle of the night boiling Crisco. French fried Mike was on the menu for the evening. So, 10 years later, I go to India and I meet Baba. Tell you a little more about that for those of you who don't know. In my first interview, in a private interview, he says to me, "First marriage, very bad marriage." He had been that voice that had saved me at that particular point in time, 10 years before I knew of his existence. So I'm curious, how many of you have ever heard me talk before? All right, Jesse's heard it so many times, like, oh God, he's doing penance. All right, so let me give you a little detail of how I came to Baba, and then I'll share some other little experiences. In 1982, I was traveling around the world. I used to be an acupuncturist in Chicago. My specialty was acupuncture for drug detoxification. Now, I was also a drug dealer at this time in my life. Job security, okay? So in 1982, I was traveling around the world. I was going to take this acupuncture course in Sri Lanka, and then I was going to visit various places, and I was going to India for decidedly non-spiritual purposes. I heard that there were these guru guys who had good hash and ganja, and I wanted to check them out. So I'm in Sri Lanka, and I met this woman, Swedish woman named Bim Vrieswijk. One day, I was by her room to pick something up, and she had a little altar set up with our friend here. And my thought was, who is this brother, and why is she praying to him? What's up with that? So she told me some stories about Baba. He did miracles and materialized things and what have you. So I said, oh, okay. Now, I was going to India, like I said, for non-spiritual purposes, but something had struck me earlier. My first stop from Chicago was San Francisco. This friend of mine gave me Autobiography of a Yogi. Prior to that, reading that book, I wouldn't read a book that mentioned God. If I was in your house and you started talking about God, I left. If you were in my house, you left. I wasn't into that God stuff, but I read this Autobiography of a Yogi and soaked it up. So I remember writing in my journal, maybe I had this feeling something was going to happen on this trip. And I said, maybe in India, meet one of these guru fellas. So she told me about where he was, and I was flying into what was then Madras, and then I was going to go to Kerala to see this doctor who I'd met at this acupuncture course in Sri Lanka. Bangalore was on the way. So I said, well, maybe I'll stop by and check out this Baba guy. I arrived at the ashram on Friday, August the 13th. Friday the 13th has always been a lucky day for me. So I arrived at the ashram. Now, I'm not thinking about any interviews or anything like that. I just want to make eye contact with this Baba guy. I'm an eye contact kind of guy. I like to look people in the eye. So I get settled in, and I go to my first darshan. So there's all these hundreds of people out there. Baba comes around, and he comes over to me. You want some eyeballs? I got eyeballs for you. And when he looked into my eyes, I knew he was whoever the heck he says he was. After darshan, I went to the bookstore, I bought everything. I bought everything in English and probably bought some books in Hindi and Russian and several other languages. I was just soaking up Baba. So the next morning, I'm on my way to darshan, and this guy from New York tells me, if you get a chance, you should kiss his feet. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute now. I've done some freaky things in my life. Kissing dudes' feet ain't among. I ain't kissing no dude's feet. So Baba calls me in for my first interview. Now, I've read about these interviews. I've heard people talk about these interviews. But the first time you experience is a whole nother kettle of tofu, okay? So the first time I saw him do his hand like that and stuff started popping up, I'm like, whoa! And you know how he does, just in case you're thinking, he pulls up the sleeve way up to his neck and starts, he materialized hot food and stuff, things coming out of him, whoa! I gotta tell you this, So he says to me, what is your profession? I said, I'm an acupuncturist. And he played the nut roll. What's that? And some, Chinese needles. Oh, the Chinese needles. What is your success rate? This was a very common question. People always ask this question, and I had an answer. 70%. Not based in nothing. It just sounded good. People made an appointment. All right? So he says to me, what is your success rate? I said 70%. He's slapping his leg, he's laughing. He almost falls out of his chair. He laughs so hard, and he can hardly catch his breath. No. That's just your imagination. Needless to say, that was the last time I ever used that figure. So he calls me in for the private interview, just one-on-one. And he's all up in my beeswax. He's talking to me about stuff I've never talked to anybody about. And if you haven't already figured it out, I am not a speechless kind of person, but he had me speechless. The only thing I managed to say in that interview is, can I kiss your feet? And I wore them out. I mean, they had to come in with mops and afterwards. So I was there for 6 days. I had 3 interviews in those 6, well, actually in 5 days. In one of the interviews, he said to me, you worry about money, you worry about health, you worry about your career. Don't worry about these things. I will take care. Now, I figured I was going to win the lottery. Not. More about that in a second. So my last interview on the 5th day, he asked me how long I was going to stay. Now, at this point, I'm having a great time. I'm having these interviews every other day or so. Maybe he'll give me one of his roles. We'll do darshan together. You know, we're hanging out, right? Me and my boy Baba, right? So I said, well, maybe a few days, maybe a couple of weeks. He said, no, you leave tomorrow or the next day. Your work is there. So the next day, I leave and I go back to Bangalore, where I stayed the night before I came to Prashanti Nilayam. So I check into the hotel and I proceed to freak out. Moses talked with God. Muhammad talked with God. Mike talked with God. Whoa, I'm blown away by this. So, by the way, do I need this? No. Okay, all right. Get my hands free. So, I'm in my room, and I'm freaked out by all of this. Remember, I'm coming from whole agnostic atheist to having been hanging out with God, right? I'm blown away by all this, and I'm trying to chill out. I'm trying to deal with all of this, right? So I had this, this is the days of Walkmans, all right? So I had this cassette tape that I had been traveling around with and boogieing to all over the world. So I put in this tape. Okay, I listen to some music that'll chill me out. So I pop in this tape. Now, I've been playing, this is August. I've been traveling since April 1st. I have listened to this tape numerous times. I put in the tape, and there's this song called Try Jah Love by Third World. And the words go, a lonely soul was I without directions. I didn't know which way that I had to go. I sought the clues to life's unanswered questions. My mind's heart had to know. I heard your call while wandering through the darkness. I'd walk 1,000,000 miles to find that endless voice that speaks to me when I am in temptation, echoing my choice. Those who will seek, they will find. I've been with you through all time. And these words hit me upside the head. I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from? Like I said, I've been listening to this tape for months at this point and never heard it like that. So now I'm really freaked out. So I said, okay, I need to calm down. I'll smoke a joint. That'll chill me out. So I go out on the balcony of the hotel to roll and then smoke a joint. Now, this is something I've done innumerable times. So it's something I do sort of automatically. So I'm rolling this joint, sort of glancing out over the balcony. The day before I left, in my interview, Baba told me that he would come to me later. So I'm sitting there rolling this joint, and I look in the sky. There in the sky, from the ground to beyond the clouds, is an image of Baba staring at me. And I mean, just as clear as I'm looking at you all is this image of Baba, this cosmic image of Baba. Now I'm thinking this should stop traffic. So I'm looking around, obviously nobody else sees this, and I'm thinking, I don't need this, all right? Now I'm freaked out. I come back into my room, and in my room, I start seeing on the wall little tiny Christ. By the way, when I was looking at that image, first there was this big image of Baba, and then there was this other image of other entities that were looking at this image of Baba. And then in my hotel room, just like you have little tiny flowers on wallpaper, I had little tiny Christ. And then when I would close my eyes to meditate, there would be this image that started off like a pinprick of light. It would advance and brighten and grow. And it would become an image of the head of Christ that would become so bright I couldn't keep my eyes closed. Needless to say, this had a rather profound effect upon me. All right, and I know my life from this point is going to be different. Jumping ahead, I came home in October of that year. I had planned to be gone for a year, but after meeting Baba, half of the stuff that I planned to do was no longer of interest to me. So I come home, and I'm all excited. Now, I'm sure that some of you had that experience where you first hear about Baba, you want to tell everybody about Baba. You want everybody to be a Baba devotee. How come Walter Cronkite didn't know about this? This should be on the news. These other Baba devotees haven't been doing their job. And quickly you find out that's not what it's about. But I was talking with one of my buddies, and yes, and I met this guy. He's a brother, he's a fro, he's God, he's cool. He got an orange robe, he looks sharp. And this buddy of mine just sat there. And I'm telling him about how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to do that. He said, Michael, you know, people are always talking about how they're going to change, but they keep doing the same old things. Now, at this point, I was still getting high. I was still dealing. So I had a lot to work on. So that was my first big shut up. Jump ahead, 1983. I go back for my second trip to see Baba. Now my first trip, this is an analogy I use, my first trip to see Baba was like you were coming home to your mother after a long time away. And you could be an axe murderer, your mother will love you. And that was the feeling. Second trip, Dad was home, okay? And Dad got attitude. So my first morning there, Baba calls me in for an interview. And now that first trip with Baba, at the end of every interview, we'd hug, had his little hairs all up my face and nose. It was really neat. So my second interview, I go to give him a hug. He gives me that, Dad, look. Hey. Oh, okay. And he's very stern with me that trip. He was very, very stern with me that trip. At one point, he says to me, I will give you some prasad before you leave. Now, there was this Australian woman, Michelle, who I would give acupuncture treatments to. She stayed in one of the round buildings. And she had a roommate, Joan. And so after the treatment, she and I would talk. Joan would be sitting off meditating. Michelle and I were chatty Cathy types. We just... So one day after the interview, Michelle and I are talking. Joan is sitting in another part of the room meditating. She gets up, she comes over to me, she says, Michael, would you like some Amrit? Now at this point, I had just heard about Amrit, I'd read about it, but I'd never had any. So I'm like, whoa, great. So she takes my hand and she pours some into the palm of my hand. There was this vibration in my palm. And she's pouring it in. I'm somewhat aware of this vibration. She says, eat it, eat it. So I start to eat it up. And I feel this vibration on my tongue and in my mouth. Then this vibration started permeating the room, the air in the room, and then the objects of the room. The very walls started shimmering with this vibration. And then, poof, in an instant, there was no time, there was no distance, there was no otherness. There was just Satchitananda. Now, what my friends Michelle and Joan see is me. Imagine a life-size picture of Baba in a seated position. I slumped back against the wall with my head in his lap, okay? So I'm in this state for, 20, 25 minutes or so, because for me there is no time. Now, you might notice I tend to be just a little hyper. When I came back, I was so calm. I was so laid back. Michael, are you all right? What happened to you? I'm fine. Thank you. I just had the most marvelous experience. Oh, what happened? I think I'll go to my room and meditate. And you know how Baba walks? I had to walk. I went back to my room and I went to tell my roommate about the experience and I was gone again. I had experienced the ultimate high. If you're ever in a Prashanti Nilayam, there's a book called The Ultimate High by Jenny Gaze, I believe is her name. And it's a book about people who have dealt with drugs and alcohol. And the title of the book comes from the title of my story that's in that book, The Ultimate High. So now, okay, now I've made up my mind, that's it, I'm through. When I get home, I'm gonna leave this drug business. Now, I still have this doership mindset, right? So my idea is that I'll come home, I'll do a few deals, get a little bankroll together, and then I'll retire leisurely and do my sadhana, okay? Not the way it works. I come home and I start losing money for no logical reason. Money is just like poof, going, evaporating into the air. To the point where in early January, mid-January, I find myself in debt to several of my suppliers, one of whom I owe several $1,000s to. But this particular Friday, I wake up and I know I just have to walk away, regardless of what the consequences are. So the first guy I call is this guy who I owe big money to. I said, look, I don't know when or if I'll be able to pay you this money, but I can't do this anymore. He said, okay, all right, forget about it. Now, that's not usually how that works. Usually there's pain and screaming, there's torture, and a body found someplace. And everybody else who I owed money to either dropped the debt or I gave them something in exchange, and I was out of the business. Just like that. Now, as I said, Baba said to me, you worry about money, you worry about health, you worry about your career. Don't worry about these things. I will take care. If you ever need an employment agent, I recommend Baba highly. He does very good work. He'll hook you up. Now his percentage is 108. He wants everything and then some. So, 1985-86, I go back to India for Baba's 60th birthday. And at some point, this is way after the birthday, I have a roommate, Roy Mallow, from New York City, over in Whitefield. So one day, we're just sitting around hanging out. He says, Michael, can I share something with you? I'm somewhat psychic. I have this image I feel I'm supposed to tell you. Something like that. He says, I see you talking to people, thousands and thousands of people, all kinds of people, people who are spiritually evolved and people who are not. So this is 1986, all right? 1992, I would become a professional storyteller. 1994, I was speaking at a Psi conference in the Poconos, 700-800 people. As I walked out to the podium to speak, there sitting in the front rows, in one of the front rows was Roy Mallow, the guy who had that vision. Tell you another one of those stories. Okay, I call this story, I do this as an individual story, I call it chauffeur limousine consciousness. Anybody ever been to Kodaikanal? Anybody ever been to Kodaikanal? So for those of you who haven't been to Kodaikanal is different than either Rishanti or Whitefield. There's no ashram. So you stay at a hotel or a lodge or rent a room someplace, and then darshan is in the morning, darshan in the afternoon. Again, a totally different setup. Oh, no, wait. Okay. I'm gonna come back to chauffeur limousine consciousness. Somebody remind me. But I got to tell you this other story first. 88, 89, which is that same trip, I was at Whitefield. Now, Baba always took letters from me. I never wrote Baba letters myself, but friends would give me letters because Baba, first darshan, Baba would take letters from me. So we're at Whitefield, and I've got these letters somebody gave me. Somebody else gave me some vibhuti to get blessed by Baba. So I'm sitting there, and these friends, I'm one of the last people to come in, but these friends of mine saved me front row, right by where was the Krishna statue used to be, right? So I got the letters in my hand. I got the vibhuti strategically balanced so Baba can bless the vibhuti and snatch the letters, go on about his business, right? And my friends are, oh, Baba loves you. And before that darshan, this friend of mine, Charles Toe from Singapore, he says to me, Baba is so lucky to have a devotee like you. I should have known, okay? I should have known. So I'm sitting there, all my buddies all around me, I got the stuff. Baba's walking out, he looks at me, and you know the sabadal that's with him, he says, that man in the blue sweater, very bad man. Always with ladies. Don't let him on the compound. All my buddies who were sitting near me, they had moonwalked on their butts getting away from me, okay? Oh, did I? No, I didn't. Okay. So, and I got sick. That darshan, I was sick. I was sick for several days. I mean, I had pneumonia, pleurisy, diarrhea, vomiting, delirium. I was wiped out. It was a serious to-do, but it was a cleansing, and I understood that. But I got to tell you that to tell you this. So in Kodaikanal, that trip, Baba had been in Uti, and then from Uti going to Kodaikanal. So I had arranged a van. I put a little notice up, I arranged this van, and there were 12 of us who were on this van that I had organized. Me and another guy, and folks from all over the place. So on the way to Kodaikanal, we're singing bhajans, we're telling stories and what have you, and somebody has the bright idea that we should form a group. My experience with groups hadn't been, I had several interviews with Bobby, always on my own, so I wasn't feeling the group thing. But not only do they want me to be in the group, but they want me to be the leader of the group since I brought them all together. So we arrive at Canal. They convince me to be part of this group. We get a little scarves and we have our little meetings, right? After 2 or 3 days, the other guy in the group leaves. So now every morning after darshan, it's me and 10 women having a meeting. And my friends are not helping. Hey, Michael, you got your harem, ha, 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 ha. And so, why do you have a group? Because you want an interview. I don't want no interview with this group. The last thing I want is an interview. If you didn't want an interview, if you ended up getting an interview, don't want one. That's the way it worked for me. So now on Canal, there's an inside, there's people on the porch, there's people in the driveway. So somebody from inside comes and waves the scarf that we've got our interview. So we're marching in and I'm thinking, oh, this is it. I'm getting ready to become a pile of a booty. Okay, y'all be smearing me on your forehead. So we go into the room, everybody sits down, trying to get close to Baba's chair, right? And I'm thinking, I'm not gonna get too comfortable. Baba comes in, he sees me, he can't talk. And he sent me out, but he also sent a couple of other members of the group out. The people he kept were people who had never had an interview, had only had one interview or something like that. All those of us he sent out had multiple interviews. So, chauffeured limousine consciousness. Look at that, brain cells working. So the routine was darshan in the morning. After darshan, I meet with my group. And then after the group meeting, I'd go have lunch, roam the area, what have you. Canal is the most American part of India. I had an international school there. And then I'd come back to my room and stay there till afternoon darshan. So one day I find myself a couple of hours before darshan gathering my things up and leaving. And I have no idea where I'm going, and I have absolutely no control over what's going on. I'm watching myself. That's why I call it chauffeured limousine consciousness. I'm gathering my stuff. I'm saying, well, where the heck am I going? And I'm just walking. Well, maybe I'm going over there. I walk past that place. Maybe I'm going over here. I walk past there. I find myself walking to this restaurant, this one little vegetarian restaurant that serves Western food in Canal. But I'm thinking, why am I going there? 1, I'm not hungry. 2, they're not serving now. And I open the door. There's 3 people sitting at the table. Gary, a Baba devotee from New Mexico, a Japanese man, and an Israeli woman who are travelers in the area. They all look at me, and Gary looks at them and says, here he is. He'd just been trying to answer these people's questions about Baba. And he had just said, Michael should be here to tell you stories, when I walked into the door. Another portent of things to come. Like I said, Baba's a very good employment agent. How many of you have ever heard of or met a professional storyteller before? And that's usually the case. Nobody. But that's what I do for a living. That's what I do for a living. That's the career, because I love doing acupuncture. Now I needle people with my words. I had another experience on another trip to 1991. There was the college boys were doing a play in a Purna Chandra. And those of you who have been there know, when there's something going on in the Purna Chandra, you're rushing to get a seat, trying to get a good spot. This time I knew that it wasn't for me to go inside. And I just stood to the side. And I knew I wouldn't stay for the event. I went over to the canteen. I'm walking in the canteen. I see this guy named Chris from Northern California. He looks at me, we say Sai Ram, and he says, this might sound strange to you, but I'm supposed to talk to you and listen to you or something. I said, no, I understand. I went and got my food, came back down, and I sat and I started telling him stories. Story came to mind, I'd tell him the stories. And it seems that every story that I told him meant something for him. Now, Baba has a very, very amusing way of letting you know your dharma. So, 1984, I'm still in Chicago. I'm going to the Sai Baba Center there on Sundays. One day I sit down, and on the woman's side is a woman holding her 2-year-old daughter. And she's holding the 2-year-old daughter like that, and I see the daughter, she's looking at me, and I do something silly because that's what I do. I make a face, and the girl loses. Mother has to take her out of the room. From that day forward, we cannot be in the same room. As soon as she sees me, it's the devil! She goes off. I stop going to bhajans. Because every time and there's no little, I'm talking about what made you losing it. I don't go to bhajans for months. And after a few months, I think, okay, maybe she won't be there. Maybe she will have forgotten about me or what have you. So I go and I sit down. I looked into the room. I didn't see her. I sit down. And as soon as I sit down, I feel little 2-year-old eyes looking at me. And I look at her and I brace myself. Nothing happens. She just sort of looks at me. The entire bhajan, she just sort of looks at me. And after bhajans, her mother comes up to me and says, I'll bet you're wondering what happened. I said, duh. She said, one day we were sitting and she was watching Bozo. And she was just laughing and laughing. And I said to her, you like Bozo? Yes, Mommy, I like Bozo. You like clowns? Yes, Mommy, I love clowns. Michael is just like Bozo. He's a clown. My dharma had been defined by a 2-year-old girl. And now I travel around the country and around the world, and I share stories, I tell stories, I teach people storytelling. I just, in the last 2 weeks, I've been working in prisons up in Central California, teaching the prisoners storytelling, because when arts programs are going on in school, in prisons, there's less mess, there's less fights, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on. And I will be working, I'm starting another program on Monday, 1 day a week for 13 weeks. I'll be going up to a prison. I'll repeat it again at another prison, and I'll do my 2-week stint at 5 prisons again next year. That's my dharma. That's what I do. Now, we got a few minutes left. I want to give you all an opportunity to ask some questions. Questions? Yes?
Would you tell us how you're applying all the teachings that you learned from Islamic in your daily life now?
The number one thing that I got from Baba is be happy, be joyous, and share that joy. So in my daily life, I wake up, I do my prayers, I read the comics, I get my chuckle on, and then I do a lot of smiling and being joyful. I think, Gene, I sent you that. There's a quote that I use from Baba about being joyful. You can feel free to share that with folks. So that's your dharma. So that's what I work to do each and every day and in everything I do. I have a T-shirt that says, silliness is the way to God. And when I wear that at retreats, they say, oh, they left out the T. I said, no, they didn't. I don't mean stillness, I mean silliness. I'm the guy who would walk around Prashanti Nili and Whitefield giving people sci-fis, laughing uncontrollably. And in fact, one young Indian man from Scotland said to me one day, what books are you reading? Because you're obviously reading different books than me. Because I'm the silly, laughing, joyful, have a lot of fun, be as silly as you possibly can kind of devotee, which gets me in trouble, but my whole life I've been in trouble, so that's nothing new. Other questions? Yes?
How did you become a storyteller?
In Pure Baba, in 1992, I was introduced to this guy, Joel Ben Izzy. He was introduced to me as a professional storyteller. I said, you do what? People pay you to tell stories? How do you do that? And I picked his brain. And while talking to him, I said, I'm going to do it. And my motto was going to be, have mouth, we'll run it. The next week, I asked myself, what would I do as a profession if I was independently wealthy? I said, I tell stories. I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I went and got business cards printed up. And I've been running my mouth around the country and around the world ever since. Oh, you're going to love this. You're going to love this. So August 21st, I went to Bucaramanga, Colombia for a storytelling festival. South Americans make Texans look like vegans, okay? When they serve you meat, it's about the size of this Bajin book, all right? So finding vegetarian places is more than a notion. But there was a vegetarian place not too far from the hotel I was staying at, and one of the people with the festival took me there. And so I said, oh, I'm going to come back on Friday and get the food for my plane. So I went back on Friday. Nobody speaks any English, the chef owner. And I'm sitting there, and he sees this medallion that Baba gave me. He looks, he says, Sai Baba? He's a Sai Baba devotee. He's every. Gotta. So one day, when I came to LA, I got stuck here. After the 60th birthday, I got stuck here. So I'm frustrated. Nothing's going the way I planned, like anything ever did. So I'm driving down the 5 freeway, and I'm upset, and I yell at the top of my lungs, Baba, save me! And I open my eyes, and this car pulls up in front of me, and the license plate says, I saved. Okay, never mind. Other questions?
What kind of stories?
Oh, I tell folk tales, historical stories. I specialize in stories of African and African-American history and culture. I tell multicultural stories because wherever I go, I travel and tell stories. So, and I look for stories. Because in stories, we see our differences and we see the things we have in common. And stories are a way to impart things without preaching. People take from a story whatever they need. What you take might be different from what you take, and sharing a story is like sharing a plate of cookies. You can take as many as you want and none at all. It's totally up to you. That's the beauty of storytelling. Yes?
I remember from the early 80s a story you told about how you were in the middle of a drug deal and the guy was going to kill you.
Ooh.
And that was a great story.
As I said, Bob, okay. Let's say you all are familiar with palmistry, the idea of palmistry. My lifeline has cut to shreds, okay? So there were a couple of these occasions. I'm trying to think of which one. Okay, there was one where me and my girlfriend and these guys came in to rob and to kill us. So we're hogtied, the pillows are overhead, I'm waiting for them to come and put the bullets in our head. I had a very sophisticated stereo system, and my reel-to-reel tape had just run out. The guy was trying to turn it on so he could generate sound to cover up the shots, but he didn't know how to do that. So he takes the pillow over my head and says, how do you turn your stereo system on? I said, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to figure that out for yourself. So he couldn't, and they didn't. They didn't kill us. They didn't kill us. I had an Indian palmist and an Australian palmist look at my hand and say, what the heck are you still doing alive? And I've had a whole bunch of stuff like that happen. Other questions? Yes?
What happened to after the stern father, Baba?
Mm-hmm.
How did he start acting towards you after that?
Well, a very excellent question. I had my first 2 trips. I had physical interviews with Baba, and after that, I did not. And sometimes he put the sickness on me. He put the bad man trip on me, and I knew it was a blessing. He would heal me. That time when I told you I was sick, I had that pleurisy. He came over in darshan. He just stared at me, and it was like a pilot light went off in my chest, and his heat went through, and I was healed. So my relationship with Baba was always non-corporeal. I mean, it started out non-corporeal. So I knew he was always with me and guiding me. That chauffeur limousine consciousness and many other experiences have taught me that there is no difference. There's no separation. How much time I got left, Gene? Okay, any more questions? Questions going once? Be joyful, be silly, be as silly as you possibly can, at least once a day. That's my prescription for you. Get your silliness on. Jai Sai Ram.